But let's move into the next topic. Nikola Mirotic is now a Milwaukee Buck. The deal is Nico to Milwaukee, and the Pelicans get Jason Smith's expiring, Stanley Johnson, and then 4 second-round picks. What was your guys' immediate reaction to this trade? I thought it was a complete steal for Milwaukee.
No, I love this for Milwaukee. They're adding a guy who last year for the Pelicans added a boost for them in the playoffs. I know that it didn't end the way they had wanted to, but the Bucks are a team that need outside shooting, especially from that 4 position, and they get it from Nico, and they basically give up Jason Smith and a guy in Stanley Johnson who they flip right away because they traded for him moments earlier with the Pistons and said, oh, no, you're going to New Orleans.
It was pretty much Jason Smith and Thon Maker for the 4 fourths, which I think is a great deal.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Stanley Johnson's a little more accessible for the Pelicans. They might have some use for him, potentially. But, the Bucks absolutely knocked out of the park with this. Nico is much-needed spacing to this team. When he comes back healthy, you've got Big Splash Mountain at the 5. You can roll Nico at the 4, Thon at the 3, and then obviously you've got Chris Mid as well as Bledsoe. That's dirty, and also they get to play around with a lot of bench depth too. But I think this spacing address is perfect. It's exactly what they need because Giannis attacks the basket like basically nobody we've seen before.
Yeah, and
when he does so, defenses collapse. The Bucks have been one of the best teams at getting wide open threes all year. Since the start of the year, they had a ridiculous stat about it. But adding in another guy who's an absolute sharpshooter from the outside, great offensive player, Nico, he will hustle on defense, but he can be abused on pick and rolls. So that is the one thing that I have to say that, without... I don't know if you can have both Brook Lopez and Nico out there at the same time together because that just could create a huge liability.
And the biggest thing with that is your best defender is Giannis, who he's shown to be a rim protector.
He can guard 1 through 5.
Yeah. So the thing with him is you're going to have to be very flexible if you are playing those 3 out there with your defensive positioning because you look at the teams, and we'll use Boston and Toronto specifically just because, I think Brook Lopez on Marc Gasol will be, something that I think is fair. But when they go to the traditional starting lineup of Ibaka, that's going to stretch out Brook Lopez. Then you have Siakam driving on Nikola Mirotic, which I will take Siakam all day, every day. And then you have Giannis on Kawhi, which is just going to open up that lane for Pascal Siakam to drive a little bit more. So I think that's going to be something where if Nikola is going to be up against Siakam, Siakam might have some just killer games up against Milwaukee. And then if you look at Boston, I think this is where they're kind of leaving themselves the most vulnerable because Al Horford stretching the floor, that's going to leave the paint open with Brook Lopez stretching out. And then Giannis have to play back and down low because then you're going to have possibly Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Gordon Hayward out on the wing that you're going to have to cover. I think that's just going to be a nightmare for them defensively if they're playing all 3 of those guys out on the floor, and that's where you're going to have to get very.
Bud will have to be very good about his rotations. I think I absolutely love the move. It addresses a clear need. Yeah. They need an additional score out there, but it does add some intricacies with what kind of a rotation you will need to use.
It's hard to hate the move when you didn't give up this much.
Yeah.
You're improving your team no matter which way you cut it because you didn't give up a ton in value. It's just now how are you going to work the value? I think that you definitely improve your team, which is in the end what you want to do. And again, we talked about this. I think it's kind of like what they were trying to do in Orlando with Dwight with Giannis is just having that collapsing defense on it was Dwight in the post, and then Dwight would just kick it out, and they'd swing it around for open threes. It's now going to be Giannis either in the post or Giannis driving and then kicking it out for open threes. It's going to be similar to that formula, but it's just now defensively, how can they really adapt to it? Do you see a way, Ricky, that they can adapt to it with Mirotic and Lopez in the starting lineup?
I don't see a problem. To me, it's not as big a problem as what you're saying because, you look at Nico and his teams, when he's on the court, have not been bad defensive teams, and he usually has plus in the plus-minus, and he's rated well in the plus-minus.
But
the thing is, too, with Nico, you don't have to play him at the power forward. You can also play him at the 3. He has spent a little bit of time at the 3, so maybe they have Giannis and Nico out there. Maybe it's okay, Giannis is at the 4, you're at the 3, or they just go,
But
who cares? We don't care who's at which because you're both forward.
Here's the thing with the plus minus can be totally screwed up. And if you look at New Orleans, what they were last year, and at least the last 2 years, when Nico came over at the trade deadline, Drew Holiday and Anthony Davis have been two of the when those two are on the floor, the Pelicans have one of the best plus minuses just because of those two's ability. Defensively and then obviously offensively, and you have a rim protector in Anthony Davis who can stop guys driving and slowing down any guy who gets past Mirotic. So you have one of those guys in Anthony Davis who's one of the best, if not the best defender in the NBA. Giannis is like that, but I think Giannis is going to be playing defensively on the perimeter, which is going to be something that is obviously going to slow him down. That's why I think with if they go up against a Boston team, and they just have Tatum on one side of the court isolating Mirotic and Jaylen Brown on the other side, or flip-flop them, whatever you want to do, and Giannis is guarding the other guy if they're playing man-to-man, that's just going to lead for open opportunities for them to drive and attack Mirotic. And that's where I think the problems are going to end up lying, is just having smart coaches who can really attack them. I mean, even then, Embiid's a fairly decent floor spacer as well when they're going up against Philadelphia. I mean, Tobias Harris driving on Mirotic, that's going to be something that I think they can abuse as well. Or if, God forbid, they play him with a 3 and, they have Ben Simmons driving on Mirotic, or they have, Jimmy Butler driving on Mirotic. Like, this is going to be something that I think they can abuse.
I mean,
Nico can go straight up with guys. It's getting him on the pick and roll is where he really suffers, though. I think that's the thing, is if you start to see like a Kyrie Irving get to abuse him, Kyle Lowry if he's rolling in that series, I think that's where I would start to get concerned. But for the most part, I think like the Nico thing's been overplayed, and I get it. Play next to AD, it's very easy to make up for that.
Well, I mean, even this year where AD has missed more games, he's plus 1.5, which is top 20 among power forwards this season.
I mean, so he's a average power forward.
But and I'm not saying he's anything
30,
like
so.
He's not supposed to be spectacular.
No,
but
that's
the
thing. That's what I'm saying. Like his defensive thing is maybe we've overblown it to an extent, but I think straight up he's not terrible. It's the help defense. It's the coming around screens, at which point he is abused. And I've seen it happen as a Bulls fan. I've seen it happen watching the playoffs last year. So I think that's one of the areas where, like, again, Bud is the guy you gotta trust, and he's the right kind of coach, though. He took that Atlanta team of role players basically to the playoffs and their best season. And I think that by adding Giannis to a team of good role players, or above average role players in this case, he's got a lot of success.
I'm not doubting the coaching at all.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I'm just trying to be fair because we try to bring up as much negatives as we could for Marc Gasol. I think it's tough to find negatives in this trade because, again, you didn't give up enough value. I don't think you're hurting your team in the end. You're definitely helping your team. And again, we're talking offensively. This is going to improve their ability to shoot from the outside. Which is going to open for
as a backup too.
Well, and that's the thing. That's the reason why I feel like they had to make this move, because Ersan coming in off of the past few years, it's been like, oh, he's going to be really good. This year, he has not been anything really special for that team off the bench. And this is something where maybe they were feeling like, hey, we don't feel that confident in Ersan to be that second guy off it. If Nico isn't even starting and he comes off the bench, maybe we feel more confident in a Nico coming in rather than an Ersan because of how he's played this year.
Absolutely.
Well, and also you move away from Thon, and Thon just has not been able to be.
Thon make a shot.
He's not been able to make shots. He's also just not been able to be extremely consistent. And you look at their typical lineup, their starting lineup. Like, they have Giannis out there, they have Brook Lopez, they have Brogdon, they have Bledsoe, they have Middleton. That's been the lineup they've thrown out there for 44 games here. I think that it's gonna change because Brogdon as a 6-man is something that is just dangerous. And we've seen Chris Midd play the 2 before, and having that length, I think, especially with Mirotic out there, it's going to be extremely disgusting. I mean, all those guys can pass the ball still, and Brogdon, he's going to be able to spell Bledsoe. I think he's a better shooter than Bledsoe.
He's an amazing shooter.
Yeah,
I mean, come on, he's on our team in fantasy. You know how good of a shooter he is.
He's extremely efficient. So I think having those two spell each other, and Bledsoe and Brogdon, is going to be something that is going to be looked at a ton when it comes to Milwaukee.
So what you're saying is, maybe, let me paint this out. Eric Bledsoe at the 1, move Brogdon to the 6-man, Chris Midd up to the 2, have Nico and Giannis just out there 3, 4, whatever, and then have Brook out there at the 5.
Yeah, Brook's at the 5. I don't know what they're going to do. Giannis, or I think it's just, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
It's whatever. Whoever's forward.
It's just going to matter the defensive matchup when they go man to man. I think it'd be interesting though to possibly. I know it's not technically legal, but I mean NBA teams still get away with it. Playing a zone. I think possibly just looking at putting Giannis in the middle of a 2-3 zone.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly how it will work because then you have Mirotic closing out on shooters on the outside, and Brook Lopez closing out on shooters on the outside. But I think it's something that could be looked at. And then even if you throw out Brogdon out there and you have Nico or Giannis play the 5 and then Mirotic play the 4. And then throw out Middleton. I think that would be even something too.
I mean, if they go small,
zone.
like they're deadly.
Yeah,
absolutely deadly.
I think that might be their best lineup. Although Brook Lopez has been
surprised.
fantastic, I think that might be their best lineup is going small.
One question I'll throw out there because this trade, even though it happened a lot of bit earlier, it's how they got Jason Smith to be offered up in this trade. Does George Hill do anything for him? Like, is George Hill a guy where it's like, oh, we'll see what he does, or is he going to play some big bench minutes and help them in the playoffs?
I think that he's going to be definitely used. I just don't know to what extent because he seems like a guy that, again, he's a veteran player. He's a good defender. He could be decent from shooting on the outside. He has playoff experience. I don't think he's an impact guy. I think he's a guy that can give you good hustle minutes. But I think with Brogdon and Bledsoe, those guys are going to get the bulk of playoff minutes. I think I don't think he's going to be a huge impact if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, I think he's probably good for about 8 to 12 tops. Anything more than that, there's something not going right.
Mm-hmm. And I think that they're probably going to still use Tony Snell too, just because he has had spots where he has been a great 3-point shooter.
Yeah.
I think that they could look though, with a Snell. George Hill lineup, at least coming off the bench, and having George Hill's defense and then Tony Snell's shooting ability from the outside. But I don't still see a way how this takes away minutes from Giannis at all. I still think Giannis is going to play like 42 minutes in the playoffs when it comes to it. So
42? That seems low.
Well, he's played only 40 in the past 2 series.
Yeah, but if he wants to win a series, he might need to turn it up a notch.
Yeah, I think he's going to be
Sorry, that was a knock.
I think he's going to be just consistently out there on the floor for the Bucks. And
they have a head coach. It's all the difference in the world this year for this team. So giving him another weapon, it's a great move.
All right, where does this put them though in the Eastern Conference?
Well, they were number one.
Huh?
They were number one on the standings.
They are still number one on the standings. So and is anyone taking them still as the number 1 team though? We'll obviously talk about that in the big thing with Jake, but
yes, and I feel like if I'm ranking moves right now as we're talking about them, this to me moves the needle more for the Bucks than Marc Gasol moved the needle for the Raptors.
Yeah, I disagree.
I actually agree with Ricky on this. I think the Bucks get much needed scoring, and it's exactly what the doctor ordered. You got spacing, you got scoring. And you now have a potential small ball lineup that is deadly from the outside.
A couple threes a day keeps the doctor away.
I don't see how this makes them a matchup nightmare at all. Like, I don't think this is a game changer. Like, it's going to help them, without a doubt. But I think Marc Gasol can help them win a series more than Nico can help them win a series.
But if you look at the wins Milwaukee has, like it's a ridiculous number of double-digit wins. Like, their games are not close. And I think that's true to the point of Giannis early on can put them so far ahead. Yeah. And because his shooting, as long as his shooting around him maintains, he's in business. And I think this is exactly what they needed.
But even then we saw if we're relying strictly on shooting, and this is different because Giannis and this player are completely different. If we're relying on shooting, let's look at Houston. I mean, Houston last year went cold as fuck from 3, and that's how they lost the series. So if those guys aren't able to hit shots around Giannis, then is that going to drastically change this team's outlook? And
absolutely.
Mirotic isn't a guy that's red hot every single night. When he's red hot, there's not a player hotter, I think.
Klay Thompson.
Klay Thompson, that's 100% true. 37 and 3. 37 and a quarter. And 14 threes? What did he hit? 15 threes against the Bulls?
Stupid numbers.
But
it hurt us.
I think that, again, he's a guy that can go extremely cold. Bledsoe's a guy that can go extremely cold. Lopez, once he hits the playoffs, is he going to be able to? Because he was garbage in Los Angeles last year. I worry about their ability to go cold. And if that happens, Giannis can put up 40, but that's happened before in the playoffs, and they haven't done shit. Right. They haven't advanced to the second round yet. I think they're going to get to the second round for sure this year. But if one of these guys goes cold and they drop 2 games because of it, it's going to be a hard hole to dig yourself out of. So That's my biggest question, at least with that. I think Marc Gasol, though, that's it's a serious changer because you could possibly slow down, the Sixers' best scorer in Joel Embiid, just because of his ability. You can take him from 28 a night down to like 20 or 19, and that's going to put more pressure on Ben Simmons, who's extremely young there. I don't think this is taking pressure off Giannis per se. I think it's just taking pressure off of other shooters.
If only Giannis was LeBron, man. LeBron is the only one that we have talked about in an East where it's like, oh, you don't have anything? Oh, you have a mediocre roster? Oh, he's still going to go to the finals.
Yeah, I wonder if that has to do with him being the best player of all time.